often suggests to do, a very simple meditation practice, but can be really quite helpful. It's okay. So with this meditation, just to sit in a comfortable position, a position which is also helpful for maintaining the mind being alert, not falling asleep, but be comfortable and to be alert. And then with this method, meditation method, to imagine or to visualize, when we use the word visualize, it's to do with the mind, it's not with the eyes, in front of you and slightly to the left, that there's one person there, and then in front of you and slightly to the right, a group of people. It doesn't really matter how many, quite a number anyway. Just one person, in a sense, on one side, there's one person sitting there. The other side, there are a few people. And to give face to that one on the left in front, and that one that you're looking at is you, to see yourself there as one person sitting there. And on the other side, all these other people, and they may be a combination of friends, enemies, strangers, or whatever, but there's a group of people, one on one side and many on the other. And this one person, me, really, look, is just one person, and the others are many. So this one person, me, I wish to have happiness, to be free from suffering. That's what is driving me, is said to drive beings in general, is basically what I want from this life is happiness and fulfillment, and I want to be free of difficulties. But also on the other side, the group of people, the same type of thinking, wishing to have happiness, to be free from suffering. And that group of people are many, and one is only one person. Oneself is only one, others are many. So should we use our life merely to satisfy the wishes of this one person, or should we have a more expanded awareness that we embrace the welfare of the many? And so then, having done this, just to think now, it's a Sunday morning here. There, in general, most of us, even if haven't gone to church and so on, but been brought up as sort of Sunday is the day of rest, a little bit like that. Saturday night is the night of the partying, and drug taking, and goodness knows what might happen. And so just to think now, we even imagine, just think about Sunshine Coast, particularly if you're familiar with it, or even wherever you come from, Brisbane, just be thinking Sunday morning, the music that might be playing, or the headache that people may have, or whatever that's going on. And just to be sense in this space that we create here in this meditation hall, a reflective state, a state of mind in which, for us to come here, we value spiritual practice. We sense that this is what really brings lasting happiness and fulfillment. We have had some taste in relation to this. And just to think about on the coast there, the people there are many people maybe there who have strong alcohol and drug problems. A Sunday morning, other people whose life is without meaning, and they're actually taking the drugs in order to mask that sense of meaninglessness and depression in their lives. And to think also of the other people whose relationships are they're suffering in unloving relationships. Sunday morning, a situation in a family which is very unhappy. And then other people who are very alienated. Sunday morning can be a time of depression. It reminds them more and more of their sense of isolation when they see others who are like in a family situation. And even to be thinking of the people in nursing homes, the Sunday morning, the people that have been abandoned there. So in this meditation like this, we're thinking, there's one person, me. Do I work for this one person, or do I have the expanded awareness that embraces the welfare of all beings? And generate a great sense of joy in your heart that you have that capacity, that level of sensitivity that allows you to develop a sense of concern for those people who are in difficult situation. And to think about the possibility of into the future part of this life, how your mind may be more and more conditioned by this flowing out of energy for the welfare of others. The purpose of my life is to be of benefit to others. And with it comes the understanding. We're not being martyrs or anything like that or trying to impress anyone else, because the byproduct of this, the experience of this from doing this, is that we become more happy beings, more balanced individuals, more complete people, people who have meaning in their lives. And so we just dedicate that brief meditation here towards the growth in our heart-mind combination of a more altruistic attitude, a more generous attitude that embraces the welfare of others. Okay, so then Geshe has been teaching over this last period of time on the Sundays on the text, mind training like the rays of the sun. I, I won't be doing teaching on that, but the subject matter in general is when you talk referring to mind training, it's about transforming the attitude within our mind from one of total self-interest into an attitude that embraces the welfare of others. But as I mentioned, there's an understanding really at the back of all of this. Any case, when you cultivate this attitude of concern for others, the byproduct will be, your own sense of well-being and happiness anyway. So it's not like we, by engaging in this practice, we are self-sacrificing martyrs or anything like that, like this. Or aren't I really great doing these things for other people? It's not like that at all. It's a very intelligent approach to life. And so then it's very important for us. We're not people who have been born Buddhists. Most of us, maybe some of us have, but most of us haven't. And maybe even earlier we were hostile towards religion. May have been like that. Religion was really uncool. It may have been that case. So we've come to some degree, whether it be religion we see or spirituality, which really spirituality is more to do with the cultivation of wholesome states of mind. Or we may be more interested in psychology, the psychology of Buddhism. But it's got to do really about understanding that the really central thing about bringing fulfillment in our life is how our mind is, how our mind-heart combination is. When we use the word mind in Buddhism, it's different meaning to the general word meaning in English. You say a person has a good mind, but they're obnoxious. Because in that case, we're using the word mind to refer to intellect. But in Buddhism, when we use the word mind, we combine the intellect and all the emotions, the positive and negative emotions. It's this totality of phenomena, mental phenomena, which is seen to be not something which is physical. And so Buddhism is about the cultivation of the wholesome states of mind and the lessening of the negative states of mind. So we're not here, as it might be in Tibetan culture, people, when they're brought up in Tibetan culture, they go to the meditation hall, they dress up or whatever else they do, and they believe in reincarnation or whatever, and they offer butter lamps. And it may or may not be the case that there's something actively taking place within their mind about integrating the teachings and reflecting on them. And in fact, they may be Buddhists for the whole of their life and they may not ever do that at all, right? But for us here, most likely, come here on the basis of applying our intelligence and our personal experience to life, that we have some sense that Buddhism might have something worthwhile to offer to us. But however that be, however that experience is, it very much needs to be a personal experience and an application of our own intelligence to see whether that's true or not. We have to apply our intelligence. And often this is something that the Lamas say about, well, Westerners, or maybe Easterners who not have Buddhism, I don't know, but they can be very good disciples because they do question. We do have a tendency to question. We don't just simply accept things. We question based on our own personal experience of things. And it can be good to be skeptical, to not to blindly follow, to question. And the Buddha said, test my teachings like you test gold. Burn it, rub it, cut it, whatever they do to test gold to make sure it is the genuine thing. So he said that, and the message is very much like that. So for most of us, really, we have that quality of mind, I think, that we don't accept things blindly. We observe, most of us have life experiences that we can use to see whether the teachings accord with our personal life experiences. So this idea, the logic we can see, the idea of this attitude of changing the motivation for life into one of embracing the welfare of others rather than just looking after number one here. Because we can see that our very life, our body, where it's come from within the body of another being. And we couldn't have survived for the first few years of this life, first 3 years probably, without someone there to care for us. And that relationship is usually so close that it's the mother who actually feeds us from her body, and our body has actually been formed from her body. And then as we live this life, we can't survive without food. And we think of the number of meals that we take and all those people who've been involved in producing that food. So we have a connection with others. Also, we believe, we can also sense that many animals have died in a sense to keep us alive, because most of us, at least when we're young, we had meat. Their bodies, they died in order for us to continue to live. Then when we become sick, we're dependent upon others. And most likely at the very end of this life, we will be dependent upon others to care for us. So if we look at that nature, rather than from moment to moment, I want this, but rather the nature of our existence, we're very much connected with others. We're very much dependent upon others for our survival and for us to have fulfillment and happiness. Even to the point where the connectedness with others is that this body that we all have, and we identify, this is me. We identify someone else, so that's their body. So we see them coming into the room. So it's a valid object to say, and the dependence upon that, we can say there's a person existing. That body, that I, me, here, has formed from an element from a mother and father, from someone else. This body has come from someone else's body. We don't exist without that coming from two other people. So this sense of us being an independent entity, independent of others, is not in accord with reality. We are labeling this body me, but this body has actually come from a couple of other beings. And if we if we believe in future lives, in this life, this body ends, our consciousness, our mind, our mental continuum continues on in a more subtle form, and it joins again with a couple of elements from our future mother and father. And so it's been said, been happening since beginningless time and into the future. So this sense of I-ness, I, me, independently existing, is not really in accord with reality, that the appearance of us existing totally independently of others. We are very much connected with others. So it makes sense that we have an attitude which embraces the idea that others, if they're kind to us, that while we're able to live this life, while we're active and capable and have our intelligence working okay, that we use this life in best ways that we can to benefit others. So this is a reasonable, logical thing. Then also as well, the experiential part in your own life of when it is that you do have genuine concern for others, where it does manifest out, you do have a caring attitude towards others, it's flowing out, you make acts of generosity to others, you reach out to others when they're in need, like that, and you support them in different ways. When your mind is flowing out, being concerned for others, in general, it's a state of mind which brings happiness to yourself. It's associated with happiness. When you're most depressed and down and a sense of hopelessness, that's when the mind is like the ingrown toenail, it's going in, like that. Focusing on yourself, a depressed state of mind. Also loneliness is very much associated with me and my problems. So a healing way is to have an attitude that embraces the welfare of others. And we can see it also in the examples of those practitioners in this world. People like the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa, who's the spiritual head of our tradition of the center. how they are within themselves. You can observe for yourself how they are and how their focus is on the welfare of others. But it's not like, again, it's not like a martyr, it's joyfully done. It's a natural thing, a natural wish to benefit others and done joyfully. So it makes sense from this point of view. And if we have, you look at the life story of the Buddha, if you've read that and if you've had some reflection on his life, and there's teachings there on his past lives, of the Buddha, the Jataka tales, you read these, and in order to accomplish the state of enlightenment, he engaged in activities working for the benefit of others. He sacrificed his life many times over in order to accomplish that state of enlightenment and then to bring the teachings into the world. So it's someone who's dedicated their life, sacrificed their life. In stories there, given his life, given his body to a hungry tigress. Other stories too, where he sacrificed his life in this way. If you read this, start to think, in order to attain this state of enlightenment, in order to bring the medicine of the Dharma, the spiritual tradition of Buddhism, into the world for the benefit of others. So he sort of set the example in reading that as an example. How to use the life is to use the life for the benefit of others. Of course, in extreme cases, it's not an extreme case if you're a bodhisattva, you give up your life. The suggestion isn't that because he did that we do the same thing. The indication is more that this is what happens as you develop more and more. It said bodhisattvas, there's no suffering at all in giving up their life. They don't experience pain at all. They only experience joy. So there's no suggestion we have to do these types of things. But there is advice in terms of the effect to the mind, developing a sense of appreciation of the ideal of using your life to benefit others. Because in a sense, the path to salvation in Buddhism is the path of sacrificing me, I all the time into the attitude of embracing the welfare of others. And that path is the path to liberation and enlightenment, and in the short, and also the path of joy. So this is stuff to really think of. But the main thing, it seems to me, is the experience, the taste of how it is, how much better you feel in yourself when you have that more generous concern for others. It's your own personal experience. You know it. It's true. And so then when you engage in the practices, it's not because the Buddha said so, because the teacher said so. It's because I want to do it. And it seems to me, when I got involved in Buddhism, I intensively got involved in India and Nepal. And at the point where I was really deciding to become Buddhist, to take the refuge ceremony, that I saw for the first time in my life, really, that what I should be doing and what I wanted to do came together. The two were not contradictory. So in a sense, that's where the real practice that we're trying to get at is that it's not practicing because we're supposed to do it, because we feel guilty if we don't, but more because we understand long term that this is the path to happiness. This is the path to joy. But simultaneously with this is also the appropriate path. It's the path that we should follow. But all this is stuff we have to check for ourselves to see if it's true or not. And important to be skeptical but not cynical. Skeptical is where you, even though you have strong doubts, your mind remains open to the possibility. Cynical is where you've already established, no, I don't accept it. I don't care what anyone says. Is what's taking place. You may say you're not. You say you're open-minded, but you're not at all. And if you're cynical like that, if it's really taking place, you generally tend to generate wrong views, that is, an antagonistic, hostile attitude to spiritual practice and future lives and existence of future lives and karma and so on. So you won't open to it anyway. So it's important to be able to discern the difference between being skeptical, being the devil's advocate, and being cynical. So what I was going to do in relation to this remainder of the talk, to use three, I guess they're images really, in relation to mind training. And just mention something about that. So the first image is the image associated with arrows. The second one is the image of a peacock. And the third image is the image of a lotus. So the idea first off with the idea with arrows is that when we live this life for us, we may have fortunate circumstances, relatively speaking, being born in Australia and so on, and pretty good circumstances. But inevitably, we will be faced with difficulty, problems. And it might not be inevitably, it might be one after another, however it is. And that was the first teaching of the Buddha anyway, the truth that life brings problems. So these are seen to be like arrows that are fired at us, however we understand it, fired at us by our karma or over, right? And in fact, we don't have much choice over that when events occur. Events occur. Shit happens, as they say. Relationships end. People get sick. People get terminally ill. People die. We experience loss. We get kicked out of a job. Many different things occur. Seriously injured. Many different things occur. These are like arrows that are fired at us by our karma. Then what can happen in relation to that misfortune, the experience of the arrow being fired at us, is that we react in an unskillful way, and that may be with resentment or anger. It may be by taking drugs and alcohol. It may be out of insecurity, getting into unwise relationships. Many different things that we seek out as a support to help us through that difficulty. But in fact, if we look at it with intelligence and discernment, and you look at, they might not be able to see it in your own life, but you can see it in other people's lives. You can see the action that they're engaging in order to deal with their difficulty is actually just firing another arrow at themselves. So the first lot of arrows we can't stop, but the second lot of arrows we can do something about. It's about getting the skill in not firing another arrow at ourselves and compounding the problem. You see how people compound their problems throughout their life. So a Buddhist view would be, you can't stop the first arrow being fired, but you can develop the skill and not fire the second arrow. And then transform that first arrows, or those first arrows, into like an acupuncture needle for healing. So with this mind training this is about talking about mind training, is developing that skill that sees that we have to, that whether we like it or not, life brings problems. If you're a monk, you have monk's problems. If you're a nun, you have nun's problems. If you're a layperson, you have layperson's problems. If you're a woman, you have woman's problems. If you're a man, man's problems. If you're a guru, you have their problems. If you're a disciple, you have their problems. So everyone has their difficulties. And there's always the grass seems to be greener on the other side. But we'll all have these difficulties. And it's a case of opening up and acknowledging that in Buddhism, life brings problems. First teaching of the Buddha, the truth of suffering. And it is important, really, because it's an interesting point I often think about and say also in teachings, that there's an atheist philosopher called Alain de Botton who says that in the West, the problem today is not pessimism, it's optimism. Because he says that people constantly, he said, particularly in America, it's a problem. Because there's all this optimism that the next scientific development, next technological development, next economic development, the next president of the state who comes along, next girlfriend, next boyfriend is going to be the solution to my problems. But inevitably these things, and he's an atheist, by the way, he says, inevitably these things don't bring any lasting happiness. And so people become disappointed because they thought if I got this would bring me happiness, but it doesn't. They become disappointed. They become resentful because they didn't get what they wanted or expecting. I don't know if it's true or not, but those mass killings in those schools in America, those young guys, usually young guys who go out shooting, don't know what their background is. I guess it varies, but I think in many of the cases, these are young guys with an expectation of how life should be and how it should have turned out, but it didn't turn out that way. So they turn it in, probably on the school or whoever else, the other people who feel to be okay. They can't accept, the culture doesn't encourage to look, to see that things aren't perfect. It's totally imperfect. There's still this unrealistic belief still in America, particularly in America. But Shangri-La will be found via materialism or science or whatever. So disappointments occurs, upset occurs, and then anger and all the rest that we see taking place. And I think a lot of that problems we see in America around that election had to do with that. But Buddhist view is to say, to look at the situation really honestly, as the Buddha said, life brings problems. Life brings problems. Don't be surprised. And if you understand that, you don't fire the second arrow and you utilize the misfortune into something beneficial. And how we do that is to this misfortune or loss, whatever occurs in your life, the end of a relationship or whatever occurs, each time that occurs is an opportunity to, first off, it develops, if we are skillful, it's the opportunity to develop humility. Because when things don't go our way, when we don't win the tournament or whatever it is, it's really upsetting. It hurts the pride. It can lead to you in a negative way, but it's also an opportunity to develop humility. And that is important. If you look in the life of Prince Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, his life, he was born a prince and had everything going for him. His father protected him because his father didn't want him to become a religious leader who he'd been advised that his son may become a world leader and therefore religious leader and therefore would abandon the kingdom. The Buddha was kept protected, and then at a certain point he left the palace as the prince, and he saw for the first time sickness, aging, and death. And he saw a wandering meditator, someone who's seeking the truth. And in a sense, that could be interpreted in a way that may have been really devastating for this prince who thought he had everything going for him, but he discovered, I didn't even know about sickness, aging, and death. I didn't even know about, wandering meditators and seeking the spiritual path. It's a falling part of the life, but it's also a humbling experience which opens the mind up to coming to explore. And that's what set him on his spiritual journey. So that experience set him on the spiritual journey, led to his enlightenment, and on the basis of that he taught, and we have Buddhism here now because of the falling apart of his life, right? So it's the same for all of us here. When that occurs, to utilize the misfortune as a means to develop humility, because if we don't have humility, we don't learn. If you're full of pride, you can't learn. As I say, pride comes before a fall. It's when that occurs, it becomes an opportunity for the life to open up. And hopefully we've all had some experience of that. You thought you knew everything. You discovered, after all, my father does know more than I do, right? And so those events can be really very helpful for us. Become a more humble person and a person who's open to learning. So then, this is a blessing. And then secondly, when the misfortune comes, when the loss occurs, if we also connect this with actions that we create, often we create actions in, for instance, relationships that led to us doing certain things. Also, if we understand it's connected to karma, things that we've done in the past lives. This helps us to establish more strongly a sense of personal values, that we decide, okay, I don't want to be creating the cause for more and more suffering. So you establish this idea of conduct. So the misfortune becomes the opportunity to establish in your life, how do I live my life in a more constructive way to be of benefit to others? So it becomes a basis for that. Then, perhaps most importantly, when things occur, when the tragedy occurs, the losses occur, it becomes the opportunity to develop compassion. Because whatever we've experienced, other people experience as well. We're not unique in the world. Instead of becoming like the ingrown toenail and focusing on me, my poor me, we utilize whatever misfortune occurs as an opportunity to develop compassion, to empathize, to sense, this is what it's like, what I've gone through. I know what it's like now. And when you come across someone later on who goes through the same thing, you know what it's like, and you can reach out to them to help. So when our losses occur, these are wonderful opportunities. These are like jewels, because they give us this chance to develop the heart of compassion. And it's that mind of compassion which is going to benefit others, but it will also benefit us. So it becomes a great blessing. Like someone like Nelson Mandela goes into prison. He's in there, I think, for 27 years. Goes in there as a very angry person, imprisoned and then humiliated, and all these things took place. But during that time of being in prison, reflected on his situation, reflected also on those other people who were the prison officers, started to see their situation, started to see the universal problems. And then out of that, what occurred within his mind was a mind of compassion, and to establish, when he left, a country that embraced the welfare of others. Everyone, didn't exclude others. So it was the tragedy became an opportunity for him to bring so much benefit to the world. And so it's for us also. Whenever the misfortunes occur, they become the opportunity for us to grow. So, yeah. So then the second, that's the idea of the arrows, and understanding that misfortune is like arrows, and then transforming them into acupuncture needles for healing. Second one is the image of a peacock. And so it's said, I don't know if it's true or not. Although ordinary birds, they eat poisonous plants, they die. But when peacocks eat poisonous plants, their feathers really develop like this. So they really become beautiful. So we don't want to become like a preening peacock. It's not like that, right? It's an internal thing. And all these practices in Buddhism are about our mind. Like, for instance, the quality of humility is not something that's projected out, pretending I'm the most humble person in the world. Not like that, just an internal thing. That you understand that arrogance and pride is a source of problems in your life. And so you develop humility to help change the mind. So here also the methods that we use, that misfortune, wherever it occurs, rather than being the source of our death, as it is for ordinary birds, if they eat poisonous plants, they die. For people on the Bodhisattva path, the path to attain enlightenment, the path conditioned by compassion, the aspiration to reach enlightenment, to remove others from suffering, even if we're not embracing that totally, but the sense of the possibility of how it is that misfortune becomes the opportunity for us not just to be a spiritual practitioner, but actually to thrive as a person, to be a source of joy to others. And so this is important. Now, this is the message of the great practitioners, a message of people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that if you look at the world leaders, that have been driven out of their country, or it might be an internal revolution, it might be an invasion, the leaders that have been driven out, and how their life usually unfolds. If you look at President Marcos in the Philippines, if you remember that, and his wife with the shoes, often this story is really a very sad one because they've lost that power. Or it was all tied up in their power, and after that loss of being kicked out of government, a lot of sadness and humiliation and all the rest. But the Dalai Lama is one of those few beings who's the leader. And remember, he was the leader of a country, and as they often said, he had this, sort of like the living God, like this, venerated so much by his people, held to such esteem. Driven out of his country, and if you see images of him back in 1959, when he crosses the border from Tibet into India, he's riding on a horse, but it's one of those really small horses, it's nothing, big. It's like it's a donkey almost like. And that's how he comes out as a refugee. And even today, he's a refugee. Right? And he's been humiliated, kicked out of his country. He lost that authority within his own country. But what's happened since that time, he has thrived as a person within himself. He is extremely joyful. And that loss and that tragedy, and he feels so much pain for the people as well, but still, he himself as a person has become really joyful and a source of joy for the world, and a source of inspiration to give this way. This is the way to go when you experience loss, when you're forced to eat the poisonous plants, and you're forced to eat the poisonous food. Through this state of mind of concern for others, that misfortune becomes the opportunity to benefit others. So no matter how much the tragedy is, no matter how much the loss is, it just nurtures him more and more committed for the benefit of others. And so this is really the message for us as well when the misfortunes come, rather than seeing ourselves as a victim. And our culture is very much now cultivating, encouraging us to think that way. We are a victim. Something's happened to us. I'm a victim. And when you do that, your mind becomes unhappy and you develop hostility to the person who's perpetrated it. And it doesn't matter how much compensation you get, how much you compensate for that injustice, no matter how much it is acknowledged, no matter how much that person who did it goes to jail. If you don't have an attitude of understanding and forgiveness, you're going to be embittered. It's you. There's no compensation that can be given to you if you don't, that's worthwhile, if you don't somehow transform your mind and be able to deal with the difficulty into some positive way. And the education of our society and the messages that we read in the media is to develop minds of hostility towards others for the injustice. And this makes us this poisonous thing. Then it's going to destroy us. Like the poison plants will kill ordinary birds. So it will destroy us. But the opportunity here is if we understand more and more the nature of the situation, how people, for whatever reason, it's due to ignorance, that they perform negative actions, and that the people who harm us, not to be the object of our hatred, but the object of our understanding and compassion. So we need to embrace that understanding that everyone wishes to have happiness, be free from suffering, but due to various factors, they do harmful things to us. And those various harmful things where do they come from? Very often they themselves don't even know. Past life influences on their mind. There can be genetics coming through the parents. It can be due to trauma in the womb. It can be following childbirth. Many different things happen to condition a mind to be a person to be a particular way, to have inclinations which harm others. So if more we understand that as a dependent arising, their tendencies, that they are not essentially evil, that they're a being who've born into this world due to the power of karma and affliction, just like us. They may have certain tendencies, but those are just superficial tendencies. And if we do go down that pathway of resentment and bitterness, who suffers most is us. As in the book, The Art of Happiness, written by American psychiatrist Howard Cutler, in talking to the Dalai Lama about events and injustices in people's lives, Howard Cutler relates the story of one client of his, patient of his who came, or one who came to see him, this man who came to see him. And the guy started to talk about his wife, or his ex-wife. And she did this, and she did that, and she did that, and then she did that. And he's really getting worked up about what she'd done to him. And then Howard Cutler stops him for a moment and says, "What she's doing now?" And he said, "I don't know. I haven't seen her for 10 years. Right? So the mind gets tormented. Who caused the torment? Did she cause the torment, or did he cause the torment to himself? The Chinese did terrible things to the Dalai Lama and to his people, but it doesn't cause torment for him. So this is, for us, His Holiness often cites this as was a young Irish guy during the time of the fighting, the troubles in Northern Ireland. I guess it was probably would have been in the 1980s, whereas a young Irish guy, Catholic, I think probably 12 or 14 years of age at the time, he was shot by a British soldier was a rubber bullet. And rubber bullets are not like soft rubber that boing, goes off like that. Rubber bullets are about an inch thick, I think, and I think 6 inches long, something like that, and it's hard rubber. It was hard enough to hit the kid here. And the power of that bullet hit him from close range, popped one eye out, and destroyed the other eye. And it looked like he was going to die. His parents couldn't recognize him. And if he survived, it would be with brain damage. But remarkably, he survived. But not only did he survive without resentment. Even though, and I don't know where it came from, he's only 14 or whatever, he didn't have resentment about losing his sight. And he was able to live his life. He married, he had children, and he established a foundation for protection of children. And along the line, he wanted to make connection with the soldier who shot him, not to pay him out or anything like that, or even to be morally superior, but wanted to communicate to him, to talk to him, to reach to him. So he did that, but he knew he had to do it. He had to do it with a respectful way, not a morally superior way, just to suss the soldier out who'd since retired, I guess, somewhere in England. And the soldier was open to meeting him. So they met and they discussed things. And I imagine the soldier hadn't deliberately shot this kid. I imagine that was the case. But they discussed and they had common ground. And they had common ground of not wanting others to be hurt. And so at a certain point when the Dalai Lama came to visit Ireland, he met Richard, the guy's name is Richard Moore, the young guy's name is Richard Moore, and the British soldier. And the Dalai Lama said, Richard is my hero. Because, this has happened to him. This tragedy has happened to him, but he's had the courage and whatever else, the intelligence and understanding, that instead of becoming embittered, he has become compassionate. And he's also seeing, obviously, that if he can set an example for the world really needs this. So we have an example of someone here who, I don't know what degree, he's not received teachings, certainly teachings on Buddhism, but for whatever reason, he has maybe past lives, but capacity to be able to develop forgiveness and to use that forgiveness as an example to reach out to others, to show there is a path in response to injustice where we don't become embittered. For most of us, we don't have that opportunity because most times the life is not too bad. But here we have these, in his case, he had the example, and instead of going down that pathway of resentment, he went down this pathway of the peacock and is now, not externally, but internally, he is someone who is a source of joy to others. So then the other image is the image of the lotus, which is very common. People would know that's a very common image in Buddhism, the lotus. These images that we have of the Buddhas like Chenrezig, they're all seated on lotuses. It's a symbol of purity. It symbolizes purity. It's also said to be symbolizing faith as well. A symbol of also purification. But the thing about the lotus is that it comes from out of a filthy lake or pond. It's a filthy lake is there and it can be contaminated. You go to India and you can see this the lakes are there, ponds are there, and all sorts of garbage in those ponds. And then out of those ponds comes the lotus, and several lotuses that come out here like that. And they are uncontaminated. Now, I was reading where some scientists were exploring what it is about the lotus that has this apparently self-cleaning quality about it. Now, I don't know what that refers to, whether they naturally reject the water on them or what, but it's something within the lotus itself that has this quality of self-cleaning. So here in Buddhism, it's like this is the idea, is that the messy pond could be understood to be the messiness of our own life, the disasters of our own life. And some of those disasters can be really terrible, the losses and the pains. and the relationships and confusion and many different things. Usually over the life, there's a few of those things taking place. And more often than not, most people look over them and see them as, oh, that was a terrible thing that happened to me. And they can be, into the future, they identify that was a terrible thing that happened to me. And they only see it in a negative light. But Buddhism is saying, actually, when that filthy experience occurs, when that disaster, when that mess arises, utilize that to allow your mind, instead of being caught up in they did this to me, they did that, labeling it, just allow yourself to experience, this is a mess, not condemning anyone, and allowing your mind, your very being, to become like a lotus. You come out of that messy situation as a lotus. And what does a lotus do? You can imagine it's accomplishing two purposes as it comes up. It radiates out light as we do this. We radiate out light to others. So it doesn't matter what happened, whatever the loss was, how do we respond to it? We don't even know often. We don't have guides. How do we respond to our pain? The best way is to radiate out loving kindness towards others. And this becomes healing and the solution to the problem anyway, that you embrace others, that you sense there are all these other people. It's not just me that goes through this tragedy, others do as well. So this experience allows me to become a lotus, and I radiate out light to others. And as you become a lotus, the lotus opens up to the sun. And so as you open up to the sun, the rays of the sun come here, and that is that yourself, you open up at that point to a heartfelt wish for support from all the Buddhas, all the holy beings, in order to accomplish the benefit of others. So you allow that to occur. And so this is it, in a sense. It's accomplishing the two purposes. The loss that we experience allows us to be of benefit to others, and at the same time to open up for the supporting kindness that we need to deal with that difficulty. And for myself, events in the past, things have happened. We can't change them, it's true. But I look back at certain events in my life which were catastrophes or disasters, or I saw them as disasters at the time. It's quite amazing when you realize, actually, at that point, I had the opportunity, perspective didn't allow me, but if I'd understood that and become a lotus, and how do I respond to this loss, this girlfriend who's lost, given me the chop or whatever, how do I respond? The best response is to just have a loving kindness attitude to everyone else. She's only one anyway. There's plenty of others in the world. Don't be too worried, It's a big, create a big deal. A lot of the things you think are big deals are only big deal because your mind creates them a big deal. There's no bloody big deal about it at all. It was actually a wonderful opportunity to transform into something positive. So I've looked at when I was doing retreat earlier this year, a lot of this came up very strongly. And over the past of my life, of this life, the events, the losses. And I looked at each of those circumstances, each of those events gave me the opportunity. And that would have been the best thing in those circumstances. And just get on with your life. And it's a wonderful opportunity. So that image of the lotus, I think, is it looks to me very powerful. Each time, if you go to the botanical gardens up here in Nusa, you see the lotus. I'm not too sure the water lilies or lotuses. Lotuses, I understand, are more coming out of the water. Lotuses are close. Lotuses are more out of the water with a stem. Water lilies are closer to the water. But if you look at them, then you can look, that is really quite beautiful. And the idea of that last loss or whatever it is, it was an opportunity. The best solution in the situation is to generate the mind of compassion towards others. And that's important too, because not only will it be a source of healing for you, if you don't go down that attitude, if you don't go down that pathway and the loss becomes a big one in your mind, you become so self-centered that when you come across someone and they're asking for your help, you'll turn your back on them. And that person who may be just coming to you for help may be so desperate, but you don't hear their cry because you're too obsessed with yourself, and you had the opportunity to save their life. And they may even take their life because you weren't willing, you weren't able to open to their need at that point of time. So it's a great tragedy, but the tragedy itself, the loss is not the end of the event, or whatever it was that we lost, is nothing. The tragedy is when we become resentful about it, when we don't use it as an opportunity to develop a consideration and compassion for others. So there's personal experience in my life because of something that happened in particular relation to my brother who suicided. I had the opportunity there, I think, to save his life, but I didn't because I was too obsessed with myself. And if that's the biggest thing I would say to anyone who has a big loss and pain, whatever you do, don't become alienated from others, but maintain your connectedness with others. It will bring about your healing, and you may very well save the life of another person. So it's important, if we can, to do this. So just concluding now, so there was someone some time back that I was supporting in a particular way. They had some difficulties in their life and their conduct was not so good, how they're conducting themselves. And someone who was related to them, but not by blood, but by marriage or whatever, this person, in a sense, took advantage of, on the basis that they saw that the other person had drug problems, and drug problems and so on. And during that time, their morality had degenerated so that person's wasn't really a worthy person. And on the basis of that, because they're not a worthy person or because their morals are not good, this person was justified in taking advantage of them. And not just taking advantage of them, but the communication just made the other person feel so bad about themselves because it was a relative and yet looked upon them as worthless like this because of their conduct. So it's important to us, whatever occurs, it seems to me, whatever occurs in the world, that we have a responsibility to have care for others. It doesn't matter whether their morals are degenerate, whether their behavior is degenerate. They're another being like us that wish to be happy to be free from suffering. In the story of the Buddha as the prince against the Prince Siddhartha, at one stage his cousin, who was jealous of the prince, shot a swan with an arrow. And when he shot the swan as it went over, it fell into the lap of the prince here. And that's Devadatta was the one that shot the swan. And he demanded that the prince give him the swan. He said, "It's my swan." And the prince said, "No," said, "It's my swan." And anyway, the prince's father and they made a decision of discussing whose swan is it? And it went to the prince, right? He got it. And the prince, when he's saying, "It's my swan," he's saying, although Devadatta, when he's saying, "It's my swan," he's saying, "It's my swan because I'm going to cook it," right? Its function is to give me what I want. The prince's idea, "It's my swan because in past lives, this swan has been my mother and cared for me. Now my responsibility is to care for me. It's mine to look after, not to possess, but to care for." And so then he cared for it until it was healed and then released it. So likewise, all beings are our beings. They're ours, but from a point of view not to possess or hold or to take advantage of, but they're our beings to care for, to look after. And so it doesn't matter what people do. And when this guy did that, it made me think more strongly just how important it is that we have these strong ethical codes. And if you look at the TV, the commercial TV, some of it, I don't watch it very often, but some of those, it's terrible, the advertisements they put on. How it is, it's just, they obviously taking advantage of people by promoting things that they have to have, using people, taking people. It's almost like predatory behavior, predatory and opportunistic behavior that looks on other people there to get money from them for me. It doesn't matter whether they want those things or not, gambling and goodness knows what else that they advertise. So it's important for us. It struck me when I see this guy's behavior, the importance for us to establish that attitude. Doesn't matter who the person, we are responsible for protecting others. And then, but secondly, in relation to that, although that guy's behavior was inappropriate, and as a result of his inappropriate behavior, people have rejected him. Friends have rejected him. But actually, our type of friendship that we should be developing is a transcendental friendship which reaches all beings. We don't have friends because, they did these nice things to me like that. That's my best friend. And if they don't do those nice things, I'm not going to have anything more to do with them. Our transcendental friendship doesn't change. It doesn't matter how bad the person's behavior is. We still are aware and concerned for them. Of course, we use discernment, If someone wants to borrow money from you and you loan them money, right, and they don't return it, and you discover that they owe 50 other people money, right, and they come back and ask you for another loan, well, you can if you want to loan it, but more than likely the wise thing is say, you forgive them. You don't have full hostility, but you say it's an unwise thing to loan the money. If you want to give the money, that's fine, but it's a bit like you forgive, but you don't forget. You use your intelligence. So in the case, this guy don't abandon, because it's more important that a person who has behaved incorrectly and others have rejected him, our responsibility, now more than ever, is to be a protector to him and to hopefully influence him so his conduct in the future is not negative. And this is a basic principle in Buddhism, because you can't attain the state of enlightenment if you reject one person. So even the villains we have to embrace. So this guy's behavior was really helpful to me when I saw that, how important it was about maintaining moral conduct for oneself, and how important it is also that no matter what people do, that we don't reject them, we don't become hostile towards them. All right. So does anyone have questions? It doesn't have to be on that, it can be something else. Yes.
Where did you say earlier on about having compassion to help others without just doing it off your own back, just to do it out of kindness. But there has to be some self-motivation, as in, like, I don't want to be lonely, so that's why I go to do it. So there's always, like you say, like Dalai Lama, they just do it because they want to. But is there some other self-motivation? As in, not so much you're thinking, I want this. Like I say, like, I don't want to be lonely, so I want to help these people.
Yeah.
I don't feel lonely.
Yes.
So is that doing it through my own needs sort of thing?
It is, but we're not perfect beings anyway, right? I mean, Buddhas, then how they see others as extremely. They see others, as I said before, many, and oneself is only one, and they've dissolved the solid sense of I. All these meditations on emptiness and everything. So when they're doing these things, they see others as being like themselves. So they're working for themselves, right? Because they don't see there's any difference. But at this point of time, it's a case of Dalai Lama uses that term wise selfishness, that we discern the difference between doing things right for our own happiness at the expense of others. Right? That's one type of self-cherishing. Whereas what you're saying there is that you're doing things for the benefit of others, but it's also some benefit for yourself, but you're not taking advantage of others, or hopefully you're not, But it does, I think in the healing profession, you need to be aware of that because, for instance, what can happen in the healing, or not the healing, in the caring profession, having, worked as a psychiatric nurse and social workers and so on, where you've got to be careful is that where you can be using those patients to make yourself feel good, and really you can be exploiting patients. And for instance, where I saw it, it's at one of the places I worked at, one of the chronic places where you had not just the psych patients, but also these intellectually challenged patients that have been there for years, institutionalized. And there was one psych nurse there, older psych nurse. He established a needy relationship from those patients on him, dependent upon him. And you could sense how he was using that as a sense of, look at me, I've got all these fans, like that. It was building up his ego. And then it was even more obvious when he decided, I'm not going to work in this hospital. I went for another job and just left them. Right? So you really got to be careful with the care when you're caring in the caring profession, what's taking place in your own mind, because that's why you hear about this. They use the word compassion burnout. My problem is I have too much compassion. That's not true. It's not due to compassion, too much compassion that you have burnout. It's more a case, most likely, where you have expectations of expressions of appreciation, but no one's said anything. No one's thanked you. I keep doing all these things to help, and they never thank me. I'm pissed off. I've had enough, right? So that's where those kinds of problems are, and that's why it is important it seems to me in the caring profession to know what's taking place within your own mind, be aware of it, because you can be doing things and actually it's all about me, and you're not sensitive of how you're actually taking advantage of others. It could go into that area, couldn't it? Yeah, it's easy. Often people establish intimate relationships on a basis of, that person is very needy, and you see it, and you go and help them, right? And actually, you have a need to be needed, and it can become quite pathological, like that. So, yeah, you have to be careful with it. Be careful with it. And I guess you can get a sense of that where the motivation is not right is when you don't get when the appreciation isn't expressed, and you get pissed off. Oh, it's young. Yeah. Yes. So what does it say? Oh, the purpose of life. Is that the question? What the purpose of life is? Well, two of our lamas, one answer I heard, the purpose of our life is to be happy, right? And then Lama's opus, and it's not contradictory. the purpose of our life is to be of benefit to others. Those two are not contradictory. But basically the message of this form of Buddhism would very much, the purpose of our life would be to be of benefit to others, to help others. But also to be, we use intelligence to see what is the best way that we can be of benefit to others. Right? But that is our purpose. Our purpose is to work for others. That's the purpose of being born human. Because if you just use your life to just look after me, you might just as well have been born animal. But because we've got human intelligence, and very often humans do terrible things in this world, don't they? With the environment and wars and so on. So humans do a lot of harm. But also if the human uses their intelligence, they can bring a lot of benefit. So it's the future for the world lies with you. It's up to you. I'm on the way out. So if this is the opportunity for you. The opportunity has never been better to use your life to be of benefit to others, to set the example. The world needs this example of people who are considerate towards others. But at the same time, to be kind to yourself, Maybe you're not a saint yet, so you can't always act perfectly. But where you can, to be of benefit to others, and that means benefit to mum and dad and other kids at school, everyone, wherever you can. So that's the purpose of our lives. All right? Okay. Thank you.
I'm a bit embarrassed for my question after that. I was thinking, going on for what Matt was saying, my father joined the Lions Club to help people,
Yeah.
but it also kept him out of the pub. So, is it okay when those two good things run together?
The publican doesn't agree. Oh, sure. That's right. Yeah, it's a win-win situation, exactly. For sure.
Because there was like the Lions Christmas cake king.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah, for years and years.
Whereabouts, where was this? Where was he doing it? In Sydney. Okay. What did your dad do before was he in Lions when he was working?
Oh, no, he was working.
What was he doing? What was his job?
He was
Forklift driver. Okay.
But not much, doing his job well, he could help people, but it was in a limited way.
What was his reason for joining Lions? Did you give a reason?
No, I think he did want to help others.
He wanted to.
Yeah. They did the parking at the footy, and they did gave out bowel cancer screening kits, and
Yeah.
did various things.
Those service clubs seem very good. There's less people going to them these days, aren't there? Less membership, is that right? Rotary and Lions, and more with Probus, because Probus is for the old people. Probus, but I don't know. It's true, isn't it? Any people here members of Lions and Rotary? No. Yeah, sure. That's right. The risk is that we think that if it's of benefit to us, it must be some problem. Right? That's where we've got to be careful. It's not the measure. And also that even when people say, oh, well, you did that for selfish motivations as a Buddhist, right? So, and then they don't make a discernment. Well, I'm doing selfish things, and hurting others. And you're doing selfish things. What's the difference? But there is a difference, isn't there? Because if you're doing things selfishly, but it's hurting others, it's hurting others. But if you're doing things selfishly, but it's not hurting others, it's being some benefit, there's a huge difference between those two. Yeah. Big difference. Okay. Oh, yes.
something happens in your environment, you can absorb that, and then that can actually colour the way that you see the world and the way that you feel in the world. And I guess my question is, how can you really clear that energy of the past in relation to maybe those people that potentially mother, father, that did hurt you, or you want to have compassion for them, but what's the actual process of going through that energetic storehouse, I guess, of the subconscious? Because consciously you can have compassion, but subconsciously you still have reactions in your everyday life based upon those impressions. So I guess what would you recommend as a way of releasing those impressions, so that you can come to that resonance?
I'm not too sure with some of those things. Is that some of the impressions you could be talking about are actually things that you can really remember, but you might have suppressed. There were events and you suppressed, you don't want to bring it to mind and so on. So Buddhist view, I think, in relation to those, is that you would be engaging in Buddhist practice, or some practice, wouldn't necessarily be Buddhist practice, but something that gives you some inner security, some confidence in yourself and your ability to be able to survive in this world. And that you understand that this pain that you're experiencing from before is continuing to hurt you and has been in the past. And you don't want it to continue like that. So in a sense, in a way, you get to the point that isn't an option to allow that to occur. So with a sense of the support that you have, opening your heart up to the support, to go back into the experience of the event that took place, to actually allow yourself to re-experience it totally, with the confidence that you can go through this. That, in terms, particularly if it's sexual abuse, and this is only theory that I'm talking about, not personal. I've certainly done meditation practices on things in the life in the past, but the ones that you can be talking about there, where if it is such things as sexual abuse, and you hear of these things where it went on and on and on with someone who's a close relative usually, and it's caused all sorts of problems in the mind, and the message is this just shouldn't have happened, that kind of thing. But it did happen. And when you go back into the experience of it, and if you understood also in terms of practice, that there's a body and our mind, and the most important thing is our mind, heart. This body is only a transitory collection, changing from moment to moment. And the other person who did it too is just a transitory collection, changing from moment to moment, like that. That's all that was. And so no matter what that was that took place, was only a connection between two things. That's all that took place. But where the problem lay was that the moment that occurred, a concept arose in relation to that took place. They did this to me. And then another concept, and it's been going on for the last 30 years. So the problem was never in the event, really, although if we didn't have the event, it wouldn't have happened. But if we hold that the problem lies in the event, we can't change that event. So while you hold that view, you're stuck in a state of trauma because you can't reverse something that's happened and gone. But if you understand that the problem is in the concept of it, the idea of it, because there's always an idea that is the problem, we can change our ideas. But really, in a sense, that can really only happen when you go back right into it and what did happen, and not say it shouldn't have happened. It did happen. It did happen. And it was the mind that said it shouldn't have happened, and the mind that created it, this was a terrible event, right? Has been the source of the problem. But whether a person can do that or not is another thing. But it's like, it seems to me if a person doesn't do that, it can go on for the rest of the life. And then it also gives the opportunity to develop forgiveness for the other person, forgiveness for oneself. So I don't know if that's helpful in any way, or if that's what you're referring to. But I don't know whether it's right, and you've got to be careful, particularly if you're a guy talking about it, and also if you haven't gone through it. And sometimes I think I must be the only guy who was a kid who never got sexually abused. It seems like, because it's so prevalent, isn't it? And I'm not, again, I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but it is. No. No. Oh, okay. Hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And I guess internally, I feel, I don't want to have that negative karma with this person.
Yes.
We're clearly very linked.
Hmm.
But at the same time, to just have him coming into my life, creating more of it. It's sort of like, how do you balance that energy? Well, you always have complete compassion.
Yeah.
And on a conscious level, say, I feel for him because that's where he's at,
Hmm.
on his path. But yeah, it's just sometimes, there's that residual, annoyance. And,
Well,
there's still that energy
yes, sure.
based on kind of that with the child that had that experience.
Yeah. Well, one thing maybe helpful is that, because when it's your dad, usually when it's done things, you've got a pretty solid picture. That's my dad. He did that. That's your experience, and that's how he is to you. But it can be worthwhile. I did this with my father, right? I had problems with difficulties with his, maybe not as bad as yours. My parents stayed together. It was a bit rocky for a while. But they, with my father, one of the things I found helpful was to imagine him, how he was first day of primary school. I remember first day of primary school, how frightened I was at school, sort of you felt, but you didn't make friends with other kids. But just to get an image of your dad, one time, he's not like, oh, you've known him. He was a young man first off, and before that, school kid, and then primary school. And then now you should see him as an old man. And is it appropriate? Do you want to have these negative feelings towards him? Of course you don't. And then also there are other things as well that, things you don't know that influenced him. Maybe the parents he had. If you know what my father's mother was like, and you start to think, oh yeah, I can understand it. And the events for him in the case of the Second World War and so on affected his mind in many different ways. So that changed my mind. And then also as well, he raised 5 sons, right? I think you've got kids. He raised 5 sons. I wasn't prepared to have the courage to raise 5 sons. And the other thing is, even in the case of where my father used to drink 12 bottles of beer every weekend, right? Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, finish on Monday night. He was never a violent drunk though, but he talked a lot, right? Just like me. Talked a lot. And what came out of his mouth was a lot of garbage, right? Which used to drive myself and my brothers insane, crazy. But it was later on when I realized and saw the damage that alcohol does and the violence and so on. It amazed me. My father, I started to see as a bodhisattva. He was never nasty to us. We never expressed a word of appreciation for anything he ever did. And it's amazing how he would be drinking like that. And it was always a happy drunk, So over a period of time, I changed my mind. Also, as well, there's some things about it with my dad, you know, not only did I start to see the positive things, but actually by the time I left primary school, because my father was a full-on racist, right? Right, full-on racist, that I was very clear in my mind by the time I left in primary school, I was not going to be racist. And also he was mistaken because it was Second World War and the only good Jap is a dead Jap. That's what he used to say. But I knew he was mistaken because, you know, Japanese are incredibly compassionate. And also that drinking thing, he helped me because I made a commitment, even if I get into drugs and alcohol, or back in that time, not drugs, but alcohol, I'm not going to put myself on other people. So my father was fantastic. he helped me to, yes, that's right, right. He was a bodhisattva. My dad was a bodhisattva. He deliberately came into this world to show me that drinking is not the way to go and not to be racist. Actually, he was a bodhisattva. So you can, from a change of your mind, your view. And after all, how you see your dad is not necessarily how his mates see him or his brothers see him or his mother see him anyway. I don't know. Did your father drink a dozen bottles of beer over the weekend? Yeah. I did. Wow. Violent? Violent? Violent. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the anger would indicate unresolved pain and stuff. Yeah, 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 yeah. But if I hadn't met Dharma and I'd married and had kids, I think I would have been a domestic violence. I said this the other day. I think I probably would have been. Well, because you see where it comes from. Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's right. It goes to the food and all sorts of things. Yeah. Mm. Mm. All right. Okay. So thanks for coming. We should dedicate whatever, just to focus now, to dedicate whatever positive results from being here together, the meditation and then talk and then discussion, so that we, from this, that we become persons that more and more concerned about others' welfare. And as a result of that, then we are looking after our own welfare for the benefit of the world. Okay, so thank you.